My name is Abdirashid Dahir, and I am an advanced mobility engineer at HNTB, one of the largest transportation consulting firms in the United States. I am also an incoming assistant professor of civil engineering. I received my PhD from The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. I also hold master's degree in transportation engineering and PhD in civil engineering. My trajectory ran from civil engineering through transportation to a doctorate in geography, and that journey has not been easy. I was born and raised in Somalia. I came from a small town in northeastern Somalia, Qardo. I went to Sheikh Osman Secondary School in Qardo. That's my high school. I was also fortunate to get opportunity to pursue my post-secondary education in Ethiopia, where I did my PhD in civil engineering. I went to Debre Birhan University, a small town outside of Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. I went back to Somalia in 2016. I worked as an infrastructure engineer at World Vision, one of the largest humanitarian organizations operating in Africa. During my time in Somalia, I had the privilege to develop designs for water supply systems, hospitals, and schools that currently serve underserved communities in remote areas in Somalia. I left Somalia in 2017 to pursue my master's degree in transportation engineering in Seoul, South Korea. To go to South Korea, I had to go through a very rigorous process. There's one slot allotted for Somalia under Global Korea Scholarship. I applied for that position. It was very competitive. I submitted my application package to the Korean embassy in Nairobi. I went through interview processes, both in Kenya and in South Korea, before getting admission from the University of Seoul. I left Somalia in mid-2017 for South Korea. When I arrived in South Korea in August 2017, the environment was completely new to me. I have never been to South Korea. It's very common sometimes to find a reason why you should study in a very specific country. To me, it was not about the much hyped K-pop and K-drama. It was about getting exposed to advanced and cutting-edge technology, doing engineering the right way, familiarizing myself with the technology and what the advanced economy in Asia is doing. I was very lucky. However, there was a condition. The condition was to pass the test of Korean language proficiency, TOEIC. I moved to a small town in South Korea, Gwangju. I went to a language school to learn Korean language from scratch. I didn't have any prior exposure to Korean language. It was new to me, the culture was new to me, people were new to me. However, I drew on one strength, and that is memorization. When I was a kid, I went to madrasa, and I finished Quran 2 times in Somalia. I used the tricks and tips of memorizing verses in the Quran to memorize 30 vocabularies per day in South Korea to master the Korean language. I was very lucky to pass the test of Korean language proficiency in 8 months. After passing the test of Korean language proficiency, I moved to Seoul, South Korea to pursue my master's degree in transportation engineering at the University of Seoul. In Seoul, South Korea, during my graduate studies, I had to attend the lectures, listen to professors' lectures in Korean, and sometimes write in Korean to do assignments and to meet tight deadlines. That was not a choice, but a requirement. To put it in perspective, if you move to South Korea under Global Korea Scholarship and you can't pass the test of Korean language proficiency, you have an opportunity to redo it in 6 months. And if you can't do it, then you can be deported back. You can get back to your country. So that was not a risk I was willing to take. I was determined and I wanted to pass that language and learn more about the Korean culture, the people, the science and technology of South Koreans, so that I could serve and give back to my community in Somalia. I wrote my thesis about the decoupling of GDP growth from transportation, focusing on Seoul metropolitan area, an area of 25 million people. My dissertation looked at ways to decouple economic growth from the transportation, especially when it's emission intensive. A very good example is the gasoline vehicle. South Korea is a very good example in sustainability arena. Only 20% of people commute by car, and the rest rely on public transportation and walking. That was a very good dissertation, and it really deepened my understanding of transportation, economy, and sustainability. After I graduated with my master's degree in transportation engineering from the University of Seoul, I got a job working in Seoul as a data scientist. It was a very rewarding job, and I was fortunate to work at one of the most prestigious institutions in South Korea, Seoul National University, where I had the opportunity to manipulate and analyze data and help cancer patients as a data scientist. I was also working as a research assistant for researchers at New York University, specifically Marin Institute of Urban Management, where researchers were looking into ways to reduce the cost of building transit infrastructure. I also contributed to that research project at New York University because New York wanted ways to cut down the cost of constructing subways. While working in South Korea, I had a thought. My plan was always to be a professor. I went into graduate school with a lifelong dream of becoming a professor, teaching, doing research, service. That was my dream. I was very lucky. At the time, I applied for a PhD at the Ohio State University. I submitted my statement of purpose to my professor before submitting my package. My statement of purpose basically touched on multiple aspects of my life. That includes the adversities I overcame as a kid in Somalia, a country that has been in civil war for more than 3 decades, no functioning institutions. I also discussed my plans, my visions, my upbringing, and what it means for me to do a PhD. I always wanted to teach so that I can really have a broader impact at the community level. I always wanted to do research to make the world a better place for humanity. Finally, I was lucky. I secured my admission into PhD program from the Ohio State University. I didn't know anyone in Columbus, Ohio. I had no family, no relationships, no prior connections, and that was not an easy thing. I want to acknowledge the role of Ali Isa, my dear friend, who is currently a PhD student at Princeton. Ali found my tweet and reached out to me. He told me that he was ready to help me to relocate to the US from South Korea. I enlisted his support for finding housing and for getting information about Columbus, Ohio. I knew that Columbus is home to the second largest community in the United States, but I didn't have any connections, family, immediate family members, and other connections. I spent 4 years studying sustainable transportation and urban development at the Ohio State University. I worked with my advisor, William Lair. My work mainly focused on 2 parts. The first one is sustainable transportation and urban development, specifically the economic impacts of bicycle infrastructure and housing values. Again, my dissertation was about sustainable transition to electric vehicles. The best way we can ensure that we can achieve sustainability in 3 dimensions: economy, society, and environment. I carried out community engagements, went into underserved neighborhoods of Columbus, Ohio, sat down with the local communities to get their perspectives, their challenges, to get their perception of electric vehicles, the challenges they are confronting. And I really learned a lot. I'm deeply grateful to them. I studied how the residents of Columbus, Ohio, specifically underserved communities, can easily adapt to this technology. How can we make EVs a car of choice? As you know, buying an electric vehicle is not easy. The upfront cost is very high, and most people cannot afford it. But my goal to do a PhD or to write a dissertation was to look into ways to make it the car of choice for everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status or background. And that's what my dissertation addresses in Columbus, Ohio. In my PhD dissertation, I also modeled the barriers to electric vehicle adoption in Columbus. These barriers can be economic, can be societal, can be technological, and can be perceived in terms of capabilities. I also modeled a set of policies that can remove the barriers to EV adoption. Ultimately, it boils down to a policy choice. When you think about societal phenomena, I looked into three policies: infrastructure policies to equitably locate charging stations in neighborhoods. I looked at ways to reform existing tax incentives so that the financial barriers can be addressed. I also looked into ways to improve access to information about electric vehicle technologies. People need to understand the economic, energy, health, and environmental benefits of these technologies. The research I conducted at The Ohio State University has had an impact beyond the campus. The city of St. Louis recently used findings from my research on the impacts of bicycle facilities on residential property values to justify the investment of bike network in the city. I was really very glad to see my research move from literature into mainstream policy in a city in America. And that's basically the most important thing for a researcher. I was very lucky, and I'm very grateful to my collaborators, my advisor, and everyone who helped me do that research. As an advanced mobility engineer, as you know, there are three critical technologies at the center of the competition between the United States and China. These are chips, artificial intelligence, AI, and battery technology. I'm going to use what economist Noah Smith calls electric tech stack. Electric tech stack includes battery, power electronics, electric motors, and chips itself. This is the same stack that you can use to build an EV and a drone. That means anyone who captures this electric tech stack can capture economies of scale. We can see that batteries are revolutionizing not only transportation, but also manufacturing and power. Historically, manufacturing sectors were deeply differentiated: a television, a car, an aircraft. But now, that line is collapsing. And it's because of the electric tech stack. Each one had distinct process and supply chains. These technologies is complementary. They interact with each other. They are not independent of each other, and they converge on a single substrate. You can think about chips is for computing, and basically you need that for processing everything, the data you have. You can think about AI and batteries, which are perfectly complementary. They are complementary because we know AI data centers require batteries. They consume enormous amount of energy that batteries help stabilize, and that's how it interacts with EVs. The other thing is the construction of data centers puts strain on electric grid, and when that puts strain on electric grid, it can increase the cost of electricity, which again can impact households' expenditure on energy and transportation, and it can ultimately deter the adoption of electric vehicles at the household level. So we can see how these systems interact with each other, and this is a very complex process. For this reason, I'm an interdisciplinary researcher, and that's why I made dissertation research basically blend social science and engineering to address problems that cannot be solved through the lens of a single discipline. You need to look at the societal impact, economic impact, and environmental impacts of these systems and how they interact with each other. If you are an engineer who is working in that space, I would like to share that I'm currently working with US Department of Transportation. More specifically, I'm working with the Ohio Department of Transportation and Indiana Department of Transportation on two projects that are basically downstream of this electric tech stack. They are connected vehicle systems and electric vehicles. These technologies basically require special training. And that means as a transportation engineer, if you need to develop specific skills, these skills are enlightened instruments for building nationally strategic infrastructure. I'm saying this because US government publishes critical and emerging technologies list, which identifies technologies judged most consequential for national security and defense. These include chips, artificial intelligence, and batteries. Now it's called energy dominance, but ultimately it boils down to electric vehicles and battery technology that you can use to move energy across space and time, because battery is the only thing that can store, carry, and release energy on demand. And this is a very, very critical technology. You know that America was early essentially to every major technological revolution: genetics, AI, semiconductor technology, all of them. But now it cannot risk losing the technology of the future, which is the battery. These projects I'm working on currently with the US Department of Transportation focus on the deployment of charging infrastructure along designated alternative fuel corridors and connected vehicle systems. In Ohio, I'm working with the Ohio Department of Transportation to, for the first time in the history of connected vehicles, develop a system that can communicate with roadside units, or system that enables vehicle to receive messages. And this message creates geometry for lane closure warnings and reduced speed zone warning. This can alert the drivers in advance. It's basically converting work zone data into safety messages that connected vehicles can act on. That requires GIS technology. It's not something difficult. And you can basically draw on the same GIS or geographic information system technology to also work in electric vehicle space. I used the same stack to develop a tool for identifying gaps along existing designated alternative fuel corridors in Indiana. This basically means having a tool that can enable a policymaker or a planner to browse, explore, and analyze data so that they can identify gaps. You need to have DC fast charger along every 50 miles. You need to have DC fast charger every 50 miles along alternative fuel corridor and within 1 mile of interchange. So you wanted to know what single additional station will close that gap, and that requires specialized training, developing these kinds of tools. These tools basically are GIS tools. They carry out computations, but you need to combine different technologies and skills, and that means the skill of transportation engineer is evolving in light of electric and connected vehicles. This stack includes R, Python, and of course the traditional software skills like JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. You also need Amazon Web Services, cloud, spatial computing, and these technologies are the same technologies that the US government recognized as critical technologies. They are in the list of critical technologies because spatial computing is very, very critical to US national defense and security. It's part of the navigation as well, positioning, GPS technology, all those things. So in essence, this means if you develop these tools, if you develop these skills today, your work will contribute to nationally strategic, your work can be used to develop nationally strategic infrastructure. And these are frontiers that are being funded. I'm going to use what I call frontier knowledge. Frontier knowledge is the latest technology, is the latest applications and methods that you can equip, that you can learn to equip yourself with the skills of the future so that you can work as an engineer who can address critically important issues. Today, you still need the same skills, but you need to be an engineer who can really contribute to what's currently important, what's being funded, the frontiers that US government is funding right now. And these include electric vehicles and connected vehicles. So you can imagine a kid who was born in Khartoum, Somalia, who went to elementary school in Somalia, who went to high school in Somalia, is currently working as an advanced mobility engineer in the most economically and technologically advanced country in the world. The lesson is very simple. Every kid in Somalia, every Somali kid in America, you also can do it. All you need is sustained practice and discipline, perseverance, grit. You can do it. And all you need is to look at the future and to look back at your community and say, how can I serve the humanity? That should be the primary driver. I know it's difficult to articulate the nitty-gritty of my journey from Somalia to the United States, but I hope this talk can give you a glimpse into the difference between where I came from and where I am today. Thank you.